Hey there, I'm Adrienne. Welcome back to Better Days Start Today. Today is a little bit of a vulnerable episode for me. I'm talking about the different ways that we shape ourselves to be lovable, how I used to do this and why it does not work, how to recognize the inner judge that keeps us stuck in self-doubt. Essentially, it's just this insidious voice that permeates everything. We're always judging ourselves, judging others, judging our circumstances. So we're going to talk about that. What happens when you stop performing and start seeing yourself? I want to talk about that powerful shift that happens when you realize that you're enough just as you are. Self-love, self-worth, all of this can be tricky and difficult to talk about. It's tough to talk to people that are even close to us. Nobody wants to admit that they're craving love or they want to be loved, but yet that is one of the most universal desires that humans have. We're either acting from love or from fear. So much of what we do, our conditioned behavior, our coping mechanisms come back to keeping us safe and helping us feel loved. So for me, I had a very happy childhood growing up. I loved my family, super close with them. But yet, as a young kid, I saw how acting in a certain way could get the reaction or response that you wanted from people. When I was super young, I was very quiet. I was shy. And I don't know that I was actually shy. I just knew that when I was quietly obedient, that got approval. I also learned that when I performed well in school, when I got all A's, that was celebrated. I figured out the different ways that I could show up and shape myself into what was required in the moment. So as I got a bit older, somebody I was dating, I could read between the lines of a sigh or the words that they're using, and then I would respond to fit whatever was needed in that moment. As I progressed in my career, I could expand or I could shrink depending on my boss's mood that day or who even my boss was, because I had different assignments. I could, and we all can do this, right? As humans, we have this capability to shape shift into what we need to be to feel safe, to feel loved. And I felt like I was masterful at that. There were so many different sides of me, and I don't feel like it was inauthentic. I really do believe it came from this space of either earning love, feeling safe, or it was a coping mechanism, which really, I guess, boils back down to feeling safe in some way in our most primal fashion. All this to say that I knew that I had this need to be loved or a need to be worthy that shaped me from before I really knew what my shape as a person was. The thing that's kind of difficult is admitting that I wanted to be loved. I craved love. And saying this almost felt like the love that I had wasn't good enough, or maybe that I didn't feel loved at all, which just wasn't true. Logically, I knew those things weren't true. But if I'm being honest, there's this piece of me deep down that wondered, like, well, maybe they could be true. And that's super scary. Brene Brown talks about this a lot. There's a lot of people that talk about this as far as kind of shape-shifting and changing your behavior. But I've heard some really interesting takes on it from Brene Brown specifically. But I view this as learning the art of becoming someone else's ideal. I felt really good at that. And I don't say this as like a point of pride, like it's so great that I could shapeshift or almost manipulate people into seeing a version of me that I wanted to see, but I was skillful at doing it. It's just kind of funny though, because one example, as I got into my teenage years, I tried to wear the things that were on trend, but I was really quirky and I loved loud things. I loved loud patterns. I loved loud colors. And so I would try to be in line with what was stylish, but I couldn't fully tamp down that desire for loud, quirky things. I never quite fit in aesthetically, even though behind the scenes I was trying. If you bend yourself and contort yourself continuously over time, it can almost feel like you forget what your original shape was. At least I felt like that. I would have this questioning of, is this me? Is this what society wants from me? Is this what this person wants from me? Is this my true desire? I felt like I didn't know myself. Like I felt like I was constantly asking if this was me or some other expectation and trying to get to the root of that, trying to tap into my intuition. But because for so long, my main concern was shapeshifting, I felt really out of touch with my intuition. As I've mentioned, I have journaled so much throughout the years. That is a thing that, as I like to say, it saved my life throughout my life. I meditate, I do visualizations, I do all of these things that help me quiet my mind so I can hear myself. I go on walks by myself with no outside inputs, no headphones in, just me and, my feet on the ground and the thoughts that go through my head, and I notice what comes up. So I have all of these practices in place, and I'm far more consistent in them than I have ever been in my life. But they help me figure out what's my voice versus what's everything else. What I learned is that by bending and shapeshifting to be somebody else's ideal, really I was manipulating myself. I was manipulating myself into believing that I was loved, but if you went below just that surface level, I was being loved for the version of me that was being presented. So there was always this uncomfortable fear of like, if they saw this side of me or if they really knew this, then they wouldn't love me for who I am. It's something that kind of plagued my relationships, not just romantic ones, but even friendships, right? Like you show a certain side of yourself, and then when that's received well, you kind of like tuck the messy pieces away. It very much creates an illusion for yourself, for the people that you're in relationship with. Noticing this behavior, working through it, writing about it, really figuring out what was going on. And this is the piece where the vulnerability comes in. For a lot of years, I didn't love myself. I spent so much time becoming who I thought I needed to become that I didn't even really know myself, never mind love myself. I was content with projecting myself as however someone else needed me to be. And I got used to just showing these snippets of my true self, just like these little pieces. And somewhere along the way, it got in my mind that if I show up as my true self, my loud, my quirky, my introspective, weird self, that maybe they wouldn't love me just as I am. They wouldn't like me. I wouldn't be worthy. So that got rooted in my mind that I didn't know me. I didn't love me. They know this part of me and they like that. But if they knew the rest of it, then I wouldn't be worthy. I've also noticed throughout the years, and I've talked about self-talk. I talked about that when this podcast first started too, that I wasn't always very nice to myself. But if I go even kind of scratch the surface below, like being unkind to myself and my self-talk, the reality is that I had this judge on loop in my mind, always enumerating the ways that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of love, that I didn't get it right. And the voice could be relentless. Pick apart my looks, pick apart what I'm doing, picking apart the way I'm behaving, whatever it was. But it was always there. It felt like it was always there. And I've been going through the positive intelligence program, and Dr. Shirzad talks about the judge as one of our self-saboteurs. It's a form of self-sabotage, essentially. And he says there's 3 ways that the judge shows up: judge of self, judge of others, judge of circumstances. And so much of this talk that is coming up in my head is this judge that's actually picking apart at one of these 3 things. And that awareness of just that has been super helpful. And this is a universal thing that we all have. The judge is like the top self-saboteur for all of us. And then we each have other ones that show up in different ways. And it really boils down to ways of being for love. Again, using love at the most basic primal word, it can encompass a lot of things. Gratitude, it can encompass empathy, worthiness. There's a whole scale of it. It's not just love as in romantic love, to be clear. So this judge is constantly evaluating things and giving feedback, telling us to feel bad about ourselves, others, or our circumstances. And it's just that. It's this voice that's working to keep us safe and help us earn love. That just kind of flipped a switch. That voice isn't me. That voice exists for a reason, psychologically, to keep me safe, to help me feel lovable. I've been wondering how many of us have accepted this voice of a judge as the truth, or just the voice in our head, whether we're calling it a judge, whatever. That voice in our head that just says unkind, nasty things to us. How many of us have just accepted that as the truth? I think all of us, to some extent, off and on, throughout our lives. I've been served up, thank you algorithms of the various platforms that exist, articles and conversations on friendship and relationships as an adult. I have taken stock of my own relationships. And outside of family, I have 2 best friends, and I'm in a relationship. I've been trying to think about the thread that connects these 2 best friends and the romantic relationship that I'm in, and why they matter to me so much at this point. I think part of it is when you're younger, the quantity of friends is larger. You're with your peer group, whether it's in school, maybe it's in a workplace, it's in a club or activity that you're doing, and you're brought together with these people based on similar circumstances or interests. And as you get older, especially if you don't have kids, you have to really put forth effort to connect with people. Like if you have kids, I'm not saying making friends is any easier, but your kids have their friends and the people they have play dates with, and then you're around their parents. So there's that connection of having children around the same age, same interests, that sort of thing. But when you don't have kids, and now I work from home, I have to really put in effort to connect with people outside of my world. But the 2 best friends in a romantic relationship that I have, as I digress, the thread that holds them together is that these 3 people see me. They see who I am at my core. They see all of my quirks, my oddities, my mistakes, my achievements, and everything in between, and they love me because of them. And this distinction really matters. They love me because of them. For so long, I was hoping somebody would love me in spite of them, meaning I had all these weird things about myself that I was judging about myself that were unlovable, not worthy, whatever it was. And I was hoping that, if they saw any of them, they would love me anyways, rather than those were some of the things that would be the reason that they loved me. I think it's important to say that I always viewed myself as weird, somebody that didn't quite fit in. I always felt like my interests and the things I thought about, the things I did, were just different from kids my age. I mean, I had friends throughout my life in different life stages, but I always had this inner idea that I wasn't the same, that I was different, that I didn't quite fit. So I was judging the unique things about me as unworthy or unlovable, whether I was outwardly doing it or meaning to do it or not. And somewhere along the way, very prominently in the last few years, I've realized that all of this is an illusion. Those things about me that I always thought were weird or different are the things that make me me and make me unique and fun and amazing. And I've been working on really seeing myself, my essence, like the core me that is there when you strip away societal conditioning, the core of my being that remains unchanging, whether it shows up every day or not. And so as I've gotten to see myself as my core being, my true self, my essence, I've gotten to know myself without judgment. I don't judge all of the odd things about me or my interests or whatever else. I just see it for what it is and don't attach a meaning to it, as in good or bad. Those are just things about me that I like, that I enjoy, that I find interest in. And as I've gotten to do that, I've been able to fall in love with myself. It sounds a little bit weird to say. I went from not really liking myself, not loving myself, feeling like I don't know myself, to really going off the deep end on the other side. I feel like I know myself very, very well, and I love myself. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person, none of us are, but who I am and how I typically show up, I love myself. And it's taken me a long time to get to that place and to be able to say it out loud. And I don't think that I'm the only one that has low-key struggled with this throughout my life. The thing is, no relationship is perfect. Not the relationship with anyone else, not the relationship with ourselves. But when we're being performative, when we're shape-shifting, when we are showing up as we think somebody else would want us to show up as, they're not really seeing who we are. So if they like us, if they love us, that's not necessarily authentic to us. That's authentic to the piece that we're showing them. So my thought is really getting down to the core of who you are. figuring out ways to bring more of that to the surface, to allowing other people to see that side of you, to see the full you rather, not a side of you. I think it's really powerful to show up fully as yourself, all of your quirks, your oddities, your random interests, whatever it is, and let people see that and know that they love you. Because then you're never wondering, am I enough, or will this change anything? You've already shown them who you are. And you'll start to see yourself differently as well. At least that has been the truth for me. I think my big takeaway is that real love and self-love, it doesn't come from meeting conditions. It really comes from standing fully in who you are. And that may sound obvious, but I think it's pretty universal that this is something that we struggle with. If this is something that you're rumbling with, you're thinking about, I'd encourage you to journal, get honest with yourself. Where in my life have I been performing, shrinking, or bending to be enough for someone else? What would it feel like to stand fully as myself without conditions? I hope this has been helpful for you. It's a little awkward for me to talk about the way I view myself or have viewed myself in the past in that evolutionary journey, but if any of it gets you thinking about yourself and the way you're showing up for yourself and in relationships, then that's worth it to me. I hope you have an amazing week, and until next time, remember, your better days, they start today.
Thanks so much for spending time with me on Better Days Start Today. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. It helps more people find this space and start creating their better days too. And hey, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter at adriancrowley.com. You'll get exclusive tips, tools, and access to complimentary events designed to support you every step of the way. Until next time, remember, your better days, they start today.